Welcome, everybody. My name is Jen Rowe. I'm from the city of Boston, as chair of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization's TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee. I'm going to call this meeting to order and read out some of our introductory notices and guidelines. So first, the notice of non-discrimination. You're invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. Now we'll have our accessibility statement. The meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Ibu Karishi, MPO staff at iqurishi@ctps.org or 857-702-3695 or via the chat box. And all participants are joining the meeting with muted microphones. We do ask that you rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After a roll call, committee members may mute and unmute themselves, but we ask that you remain muted unless you're actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, you can use the raise hand function, which you can find on the participants button at the bottom of the screen. A window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom or in the reactions button in the toolbar. And then as chair, I'll call on participants. And at this point, I will ask if anyone to raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting. Gonna beat. All right. Seeing none, if someone later wishes to, we'll have to address it then. But going forward, we're not doing that. Next slide, please. We have a somewhat new committee guideline addendum. Just as a notice that board members who are not members of this committee are welcome to attend, but only in an observer capacity. They'll keep their cameras off, microphones muted, and refrain from using Zoom reactions, hand raising functions, or the meeting chat. And then I won't recognize these members during the meeting, and MPO staff may assist in enforcing these protocols in Zoom. Great. So with that, I'll take roll. I have first, and for anyone who just joined, I'm Jen Rowe. I chair this committee and represent Mayor Michelle Wu and the city of Boston. I'll first call upon MassDOT seat 1.
MassDOT, Sam Taylor here.
Thank you, Sam. MassDOT seat 2. Okay. Not hearing anyone, but I'll circle back if MAPC.
Good afternoon, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
Thanks, Eric. Community Advisory Council.
Caitlin Allen Colley for the Community Advisory Council.
Thanks, Caitlin. Town of Brookline.
Afternoon, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green for the Town of Brookline.
Erin. Town of Arlington.
Eric Diggins, Town of Arlington here.
Excellent. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville. Brad online. I will loop back. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giametti, Metro West.
Thanks, Dennis. And then Metro West Regional Transit Authority.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. This is Tyler Tarasi representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA. Present.
Thanks, Tyler. And I heard in advance that Megan Roach from the town of Lexington wasn't able to make it. But is there anyone else who I missed on the first go around or just joined? All right. We will continue on then. So with that, we'll move into the public comments. We traditionally offer these at the outset of the committee meetings. We also do welcome non-members to contribute during the discussion after members have been called on, if as their time in the agenda allows. So would anyone like to take the opportunity to speak now? All right, I see Marzi Galaska.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the ability to speak with you in front of you today. So my name is Marcy Galaska. I serve as the Director of the Office of Community and Economic Development in the town of Swampscott. And I'm here to respectfully request of this board to continue to support the Swampscott Rail Trail. It's project number 610666. And currently it looks like it's being slated to be removed from the tip. I'm here to address any questions that you might have about the project. We're advancing the design. We're actively working with a project manager at MassDOT, and I'm here just to kind of state our support, the town support for the project, the fact that it is a regional project, part of the Border to Boston Trail, as well as East Coast Greenways. I spoke last week at the TIP meeting as well, so I'd just be here if you have any questions in regards to our project. And just I wanted to state that, it's really important for us to keep the project. The town of Swampscott was a little disappointed to see its removal without any feedback or any comments from either the MPO, the staff, or even through the MassDOT staff. So again, I just request that the project be hopefully restored, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Is there anyone else who'd like to make comment at this time? All right. Seeing none, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is the TIP project updates. Ethan.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm a senior transportation planner on MPO staff. The purpose of this presentation, if we can please go on to the next slide, is just to provide a few updates that staff have received from project proponents and I've heard elsewhere versus what was presented at a prior MPO meeting. And if we can please go mostly, yes, and one more, please. Most of these updates are ones that we will either be reiterating because they will have bearing on discussion at next week's MPO meeting, though there are some new items. Previously, staff reported to this committee and the MPO board that there were 5 projects currently listed in the 2026 to 30 tip that are carrying forward into the next tip that had seen different cost changes beyond the MPO's policy threshold set back in the 2021 tip project cost policies. These are increases beyond either 10% for projects greater than $10 million or $2.5 million for projects less than $10 million, or whichever of those two thresholds get triggered first, basically, for each project. Just to verbally state which these 5 were, because they will come back again next week. That was the Belmont Community Path project for the Mass Central Rail Trail, which saw a 79.2% cost increase between 75 and 100% design. That's based on a 100% comment submission from January 15th. The Bridge Preservation Project for Cambridge Street over the MBTA, which saw an increase from 16.5 to $20.74 million at submission of a 25% design back in October. I will also note, for additional explanation of that cost increase, the City of Boston and their consultant provide a memo for review by both committee and board members that is available on the MPO calendar, just explaining specifically what main drivers were on that increase. We also recently heard with rehabilitation of Washington Street at the last committee meeting as well, as far as the main drivers around the 25% comments that were submitted, our 25% package that the town and their consultants submitted to MassDOT for that project, and discussion of methodology around cost increases, which we will come back to at a later part of this meeting. And the next 2 projects were both in the City of Lynn for Essex Street with an increase at the 25% design stage of 43.5%, and the rehabilitation of Western Avenue in Lynn at 48.6%. Before I go further, I will remind that the reason why we are reiterating this is that the main objective for next week's MPO meeting is consistent with the 2021 TIP project cost policies, to have the MPO review each of these cost estimates and choose whether or not they would wish to approve these cost increases for inclusion in the TIP. In the case of the Western Avenue project, that cost increase would be represented in a future TIP, likely federal fiscal year 2032, so its approval doesn't have bearing on fiscal constraint. I will have more info on that again a little bit later. With that being said, those were the five that were previously reported. In between recent meetings, there have been about four additional ones that we want to note, though these increases are generally smaller than each of these five. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Most of these are projects that have submitted 100% design packages recently and are proposed for funding in federal fiscal year 2027, with one exception. The first project is the improvements on Route 3A from Otis Street and Cole Road in the town of Hingham. This is about a 10.8% increase from approximately a $32 million cost estimate to a $35.4 million estimate at the 100% design stage. Major driver there was mostly around additional adjustments around drainage and retaining walls in the project area, I believe. The next project was the Spot Pembroke Greenway project in the city of Malden. This one is actually a project that was funded at the Project Review Committee approval stage some years ago and submitted or received a 25% design back in August with a resubmission to Project Review Committee in mid-December. I will note that the project is still at 25% design. That Project Review Committee resubmission was due to an adjustment to the project's southern limit. And again, because it had been a few years in between when that 25 when the project was funded and when that 25 came in, the 63.5% increase here more or less reflects that difference we typically see on other projects like this between Project Review Committee approval and that 25% stage. Also noting that this is a fully on-street project for the most part, so some of these elements that have been removed from the scope are because it connects to the Northern Strand Trail that already exists. The city has provided additional information there as well. The next two projects are the Boston Street Improvements project in the city of Salem. I will circle back on that one on the next slide. But the fourth project is the intersection reconstruction at Route 3 in Bedford Road and South Bedford Street in the city of Woburn. This project recently submitted a 75% resubmission back in November 2025. That was known during scenario development. With that being said, there is a 100% design that is expected in April. And the project does have a new cost estimate that staff believe is associated with that 100% design. That takes the project from $4.88 million to $6.17 million, a 26% increase. So again, each of these four projects, they do have generally smaller increases than those other five, but they do surpass the threshold set by the MPO back in 2021, and therefore we will be bringing them to the board next week for additional review there. Now, on the next slide, please. I want to circle back as well on the Salem project specifically because this project submitted a 100% design. This was a project that in original materials that staff presented to this committee and the board, excuse me, had a 75% design submission. As a result, consistent with the MPO's readiness guidelines, and based on some discussions that were had at TIP readiness days, staff decided to take a more conservative approach and propose the project in federal fiscal year 2028 in those initial programs. With that being said, because this project submitted a 100% design before March, the project is no longer going to be recommended for a delay to federal fiscal year 2028. Again, that is consistent with the MPO's readiness guidelines. That being said, the 100% package submission was overdue on the project. And so as a result, based on, again, that feedback that staff received from MassDOT at TIP readiness days, staff do believe it can still be funded in fiscal 27 and deliverable in that year, but there may still be some risk in doing so. Again, this is a $28.15 million project, so that relative size does play a factor in assessing risk. With that, if we can go on to the next slide, we do have a couple other new project-related items we want to flag. The first is some good news here as well. Again, another project that has been submitting design updates a little bit ahead of schedule. This one is the bike path construction for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury. The town of Sudbury submitted a 75% design for the project back on February 25th. And the project still is recommended to stay in federal fiscal year 2029 due to the fact that its prior milestone was a 25% design public hearing. and also based on some of the conversation that took place at MassDOT Tip Readiness Days that staff concurred with as far as keeping the project in 2029. That being said, at the 75% design stage, we've actually seen a decrease on this project of about 17.6%. Now, this is a sort of trail-only project. I believe it's mostly almost entirely an asphalt trail all the way through, not really any structures associated. So as a result, a 17.6% decrease for a project like this is a $1.5 million decrease. So it is not, at least in terms of real dollar terms, as large a decrease as we may wish to see on some projects, but I will note that it is still good news for this specific project. And because the project has recently submitted a 75% design, that does indicate that it is a strong candidate for acceleration in a future tip if the town can also make a 100% design submission by March 2027. This is to say, we are currently recommending keeping it in federal fiscal year 2020, federal fiscal year 2029. If by this time next year the town has their 100% in, it would be pulled up into 2028 as part of the next tip. So just noting that here, that it is one that we'll be keeping an eye on. With that as well, we also, on the next slide, have some projects that, through coordination with MassDOT's Highway Division, two projects that have been flagged for consideration for regional prioritization. What we mean by that is saying these are two projects that are currently funded in MassDOT's statewide highway section of the TIP, though they could also be funded through the regional target program in the TIP as well. This first project is the Lake Cochituate Path in the town of Natick, which has an estimated cost of $6.4 million. This is a connection between the Cochituate Rail Trail and the sort of Golden Triangle area in Natick. The project actually is a little bit ahead of where MPO readiness guidelines would put it for a fiscal 2027 project. It submitted plans, specs, and estimates on November 4th, 2025, so ahead of that 100% design stage. That being said, while its submission is ahead of the readiness guidelines, it does still have to address certain specific needs around right-of-way and Section 4F permitting. 4F permitting, I believe, referring to parks and open space access and different considerations there. So it is a project that is currently funded in fiscal 27 in the statewide program. If the MPO were to fund this project, it would likely be funded in fiscal 2027 of the regional target program at that $6.4 million price point. I'll also note too, before we move along, these projects are not scored because of when staff received these projects, so we did not have enough time to score them. So just noting that as well. But again, still two projects that we have received for consideration against the unprogrammed balances. That second project on the next slide is the Cottage Street School Improvements Safe Routes to School project in the town of Sharon. This has an estimated cost of about $3.11 million. MassDOT and the town are targeting a design public hearing date of March 26th, 2026 on the project. Based on additional notes from Readiness Days, the right-of-way for this project is progressing along quite well, and there does not appear to be any major permitting challenges anticipated for the project. Based on that design public hearing date, it is a candidate for federal fiscal 2029 funding under MPO guidelines, and it is currently funded in federal fiscal year 2029 of the statewide program. That being said, because Safe Routes to School projects tend to be much smaller projects, there is a possibility that this project could also be funded in federal fiscal year 2028, where there is more funding available in 2029, though at this project's price point, it could be funded in either year fairly safely. So with that, we did want to keep this section fairly brief in terms of information, provide time for discussion. If we can go on to the next slide, please. Staff are happy to take any questions on any of the updates that are presented here first. I will also note that the next stage of the meeting is about more sort of broad program development discussion rather than project-specific updates. So if there are questions related to that, we can always get to those there. So happy to take any questions on what was just presented.
Thanks, Ethan. Dennis, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ethan, for the information. Very helpful. Just a quick question, maybe more of a comment. When we have I think the first slide where you had the current price and you had some significant increases on 4 or 5 projects, do you have the original price when it went on the tip, what the cost was? I always like to see the historical view, so we don't just see how it steps up. If there's multiple step ups, I like to see where the aggregate dollar value increased. So do we have the initial numbers? And if you do, are they different from what we have, the current number before the
Yeah.
increase?
I have those. I can pull them up if you would like. If you want to, I don't remember the specific projects. If you want to go back to the slide, Ethan, but I I do have that information. I can pull it up.
Yes, if we could go back a few slides. I will also, and one more slide back, please. I will also note for members that the TIP program tables that are on the MPO calendar do have a column that lists the year these projects were first programmed as well, though what I think Adriana is going to be pulling up also has that information in it as well.
Okay, I'll go project by project, but so let's see. It's just a little bit tricky because I don't have the project IDs on hand, but the Belmont Community Path was programmed at $21 million. And the you know what, maybe I'll just put them in the chat because that'll be more efficient, but I'll go through them. Thank you.
All right. Wait for those to go in the chat.
Oh no, yeah, sorry. You can keep the
Oh,
discussion
should we
going.
continue
Sorry,
on? Okay,
sorry.
okay, no worries. Okay. I think Eric, were you next?
Yeah, thank you. Um, Ethan, the Belmont Community Path, I've asked this in the past. Do we have any sense of just the what the costs associated with like the tunnel portion of it? Because I know a lot of people think, wow, we're spending almost $50 million on a trail, a shared use path. But my sense is like a big portion of that cost is related to a bicycle and pedestrian tunnel underneath the train tracks that really connects Belmont Center and neighborhoods on one side to the schools, the middle school, the high school, a new hockey rink on the other side. And so I just think that would be helpful for people to understand that it's not a $50 million, bike trail.
So I can say what I know, and then I may actually pass it over to folks at MassDOT who might have access to more of the detailed budget than I currently have in front of me. What I can say is that while a tunnel is, I think, one of the major drivers, especially around the complexity of that specific project, it is also a rail with trail project in addition to the tunnel, which is generally going to be even more expensive than a sort of trail without rail as well. So the
Why
tunnel,
do you think that is?
mostly around management of right of way, one of the other major factors as well, especially addressing the new budget increase on the project, is also around managing diversions for the MBTA during construction on the Fitchburg line in the project area. So there is money in this cost increase that is, I believe, intended to cover reimbursement on different transit diversions.
But would that, I mean, again, maybe that's a conversation to have, yeah, with the offline with the MassDOT project team, because my question would just be like, are all the diversions related to the tunnel, or is it related to the construction of the path adjacent? Because it is an important thing, because there's a number of these across the region and the state actually where there's interest in trying to have rail with in close to the right of way. And so understanding kind of what those impacts are from a cost and impact on the actual, do you have to divert service because of that would be good to know.
Yeah. So what I can say, and I may pass it over to MassDOT after I say this, is that staff did receive a application this year for a somewhat similar project over in Cambridge that based on just a project review committee approval for that project in Cambridge for a Fitchburg line crossing. So it's not even at 25% design yet. That one is looking at about $16 million. And that one is a crossing of the Fitchburg line with a very small section that is rail with trail. So that's at 16. This one's about at 48. I'll also note as well, this is about a mile for phase one. The town has phased this project already
Yeah, yeah, no,
to sort of keep costs down. So
yeah, yeah. And then my other question is related to the project in Hingham. That project has gone up quite a bit in cost too, but I don't see it here.
can we go on to the next slide, please?
Oh,
Uh,
you did present. Okay, I'm sorry. Additional cost changes. Okay, sorry, I completely missed that. And
yes,
that went from 20, current cost was 31, but in the sheet you posted the other week, last year we programmed it. It looks like we programmed it at 20 something.
yes. So I will note Adria did, per Dennis's prior question, add a couple those first five projects in the chat as far as their initial program costs. As
Okay,
folks may remember from last year's tip development cycle, this project on Route 3A was one of those projects that a very similar conversation was had about.
right.
This project was originally programmed for $8.7 million as mostly a like safety and signals upgrade project, and that was all the way back in the 2020 to 2024 tip. So quite a few years ago now. That project then went up in cost to about $15.5 million in the 2021 to 25 tip. It stayed around that cost point until it was $28.7 million in the 25 to 29 tip as well. Uh, I will note one of the other kind of important factors here is that because of that cost increase, as was reflected last year, and again, some uncertainty around whether or not the project would make a federal fiscal year 26 add date, which, based on our current understanding, will not. We also used an advanced construction balance to sort of spread the money across multiple years. So it had $10 million in fiscal 26 and that 21.95 million in fiscal 27 as well. So the increase here, over the years, this project has increased substantially, but in terms of year over year increase on the project, it is more slight, at least in this
So
case.
I would just note, and I don't know if there's anyone, from the town here. We did, and Ethan, I think you were a part of this, right? We had a meeting, I think back in June of last year with the town, with the DPW director. And I know their frustration has been that over the years, the like the scope has like increased because there's been a desire to address like other parts of like in the area, and so they've sort of been required to increase the scope of it. So I think that's related to some of the cost, and that's made the project a little more complicated. So I know they've been a little bit frustrated. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from them at one of the upcoming meetings, just again voicing their frustration because this has been we've constantly kind of pushed this one back too. But I just wanted to highlight that, and I appreciate the update here.
Thanks, Eric. Uh, Len.
I appreciate you making that history known, Eric. And to the extent those kinds of things can be documented, so that we can go back, because I'm not going to remember this. I might remember some of it, but I guarantee you, like, a month from now, I probably won't remember it. And if to the extent I ever remember it, I'm going to say I'm mixing this up with something else. And so it just helps, so that we can really take into account the extenuating circumstances that are reasonable, and so that'll just give me a little chance to give a shout out to that Cambridge Street project and that memo that was created for it. I won't say it should be the gold standard because I mean, but maybe it should. It's just really clear and it lays out the rationale. In this case, it's for one to accelerate when it comes to when it gets programmed, but explains the reason for the increase in cost. But this is all just kind of extra to what I wanted to ask. And that is, I think it was could you go forward a couple of slides? It's to the project that you are saying that we might be able to advance by a year, which I think is great. I think it might be back one slide. Was it this one? There's a project that you said we might be able to advance by a year. It might be this one. Do you remember that, Nathan? I'm sorry, Ethan.
Yes, so there are two
Okay.
projects. One is the one in City of Salem, which we are
Yeah.
proposing pulling up, consistent with the Readiness Days recommendation.
Yeah.
This one, staff are recommending that it stays in fiscal 29 for now.
Yeah.
But that is because that is consistent with MassDOT's recommendation as well.
Right, right,
Again,
right.
because there's still some permitting items to iron out here, even though the 75 is already in.
Right, right, right. But there was a possibility you said that we might be able to bring it forward a year. And I think the answer is obvious, but I just want to make sure. Were we to try to leave room, or try to make it possible for it to advance a year, we'd have to leave room, in that year's funding, right? The year to which we would move it, right? We we couldn't completely fund that year, and then we reasonably say that we could allow it to move up if it, met all the requirements. So we'd have to leave some headroom, right?
Uh, Short answer is yes, but I mean,
Okay.
my somewhat sarcastic answer is that that does assume that the program remains static year over year, which is deeply unlikely. So even without like or sort of wiggle room in between the years, we are recommending that we revisit this project this time next year for potential acceleration.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. I just wanted to understand to what extent we would need to leave headroom if we were going to even consider that. But I guess you're saying is that because of the fluid nature, of everything. If it did need to accelerate, we would probably be able to do it. You're not saying that, but I guess I'm saying that. Is that a reasonable statement for me to say, Ethan?
I mean, under the MPO guidelines, it could fit, but that doesn't line up with, other factors on the project as well that are a little more conservative there. And again, there is time because we update the tip every year to
Okay.
revisit these things, over time. So,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. And yeah, I do note that we're uh, kind of at time for this agenda item. And Brett, if your comment had like something exactly to do with something that was the conversation there, we could do a very quick one. But otherwise, I think want to keep going.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I just want to make sure that we are documenting all the ideas and questions that came up here so that our readiness guidelines can continue to take advantage of all this technical knowledge. Thanks, everybody.
Brett. All right. So yeah, I think I'll pass it back to Ethan for kind of the tip development discussion.
thank you. Uh, this section of the presentation is actually going to be a little bit more open-ended to address some of those questions that we sort of started time out earlier, but I did just want to tee it up with a little more information as well. If we can go to the next slide, please. So again, just to sort of, oh, this got a little bit messed up, but just to recontextualize where we are at here as far as tip development timeline. With the March 19th MPO board meeting next week, there's only about 2 more MPO meetings to iron out the outstanding factors in this tip, both funding of new projects, again, we mentioned some of those earlier, but also to address some of those cost increases I mentioned and potential deficits. I do want to note, after covering those cost increases, if we can please go on to the next slide, that we still also need to cover discussions about different schedule reviews that have come up from members, both for this project or for the Cambridge Street Bridge project that was just mentioned, which again has that memo, and others, and both fill-in projects for statewide highway and transit project fill-ins. We've also heard from some members that there may still be some interest, despite the lack of funding in federal fiscal year 2031, to consider the funding of new municipal projects in that year. Again, as part of tip development during these upcoming meetings. I do want to remind folks, if we go on to the next slide, of where we are at, assuming the changes that I just presented, 2 different programming years for projects. So again, at the March 5th MPO meeting, staff presented where we believe the unprogrammed balance lie for each of the different years of the 2731 program, based on the shift of the Salem Boston Street project out of fiscal 28 up into 2027. So again, about 28 million that moved between those 2 years. It now appears that federal fiscal year 2027 has about $49.16 million of available funding. 2028, 89.35 million. 2029, about 9.17 million. 2030 and 31 remain unchanged as a result of these. That's about 13.3 and $300,000. However, and I'll be representing this next week to the MPO board, I'm mentioning this so we can sort of contextualize discussion here. If we can go on the next slide, all of those 9 cost increases I just mentioned and the 1 cost decrease amount to having a net change on these tip years, primarily concentrated in federal fiscal year 27 and 2030. In the case of the 2027 program, That unprogrammed balance that we presented back on March 5th is now reduced from 49.16 million to $29.55 million. Again, assuming the MPO board votes to approve every cost increase of those nine there. In federal fiscal year 2030, should the board vote to approve all of those, that takes the balance from 13.3 million down to $17.17 million there as far as covered. So again, what would happen if the board chose to approve every cost increase, notwithstanding any other scheduling factors, we would have a deficit in 2030 for that year. So just noting that as well. So that's just an informational element. Before we go back to project-specific updates, again, which staff solicited requests for covering late yesterday, I will note to sort of head off a question that came up, I believe, last week, and also we've heard from some members about. If we can go to the next slide. Again, I will note that based off of that slide that I just presented, there is insufficient funding right now to both cover project cost increases and add more projects to federal fiscal years 2030 or 2031. Besides new projects that staff received applications for, that also includes retention of projects that do not meet the MPO's minimum readiness guidelines, of which there are 4 projects in that category. The only way that new projects could be funded through the TIP or that any retained projects are kept on could be done by not approving project cost increases, which I would note is tantamount to the removal of those projects, as staff cannot partially fund a project on the TIP, the removal of other projects from the TIP in a manner that is not consistent with the MPO, or at least in a manner that is not aligned with the proposed or the readiness guidelines that the MPO has in place, or the depletion of funding reserves. This is basically to say the MPO would need to functionally zero out 2030 and 31 and also remove or cut funding to other projects in order to do so. So I am just noting that because that is a question that folks have asked, recognizing that there's about 7 projects that applied for funding this year that are trying to get on the TIP and have been in some cases for 2 years now, though that is sort of the required action in order to put those projects forward. If we can go back one slide, I will happily open the floor to discussion, though I know that we do have a list of projects in order that I believe folks wanted to work through to that effect.
Yeah. Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, I did have we had solicited sort of some like uh, a question earlier to tip committee members about like projects or topics they wanted to speak to. So I'm going to work through that list. Eric, I do see you have your hand up. I do get the note about 2 projects that you wanted to speak to, or is that what you wanted to talk about now, or okay, something else? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to sort of ask this question, but also I think make this point. And maybe Ethan, you can clarify. But I know something that often comes up when we're struggling with trying to fit everything on the tip when we have fiscal constraint is the question is, can we phase a project over multiple fiscal years? And what is the sort of there's a guidance from Federal Highway on that, right? Because and we call that to advanced construction, right? When we phase a project over multiple years, it's not something we can easily do, is the answer, right?
I would say no. Generally, the cost threshold required for a project for us to do that is 25, or I should say, at least $25 million on a project like that.
And that's a Federal Highway guideline.
That's both state and MPO, actually, I believe, as far as programming. We haven't typically, I think, incurred that policy as part of recent tip development, but I have heard that that is a rule, at least. I may need to defer for a little more clarity to folks on the fourth floor for that. But
the reason I raise this is just that, I think it's good for folks to know that it's challenging for us to say, okay, well, what if we funded just a little bit of a project in 2031 and then we pushed the cost into 2032, we could fit more projects on here. It's actually something we can't really do.
yeah, I should say we cannot, because of how little funding there even is in reserve, even if that was an option, that would also likely not work.
Oh, and then Ethan, last question. Have you also, sometimes you do this, you've also projected out, because there are some big projects out there that are being advanced constructed, like Rutherford and McGrath. Have you projected out what will be available in 32 based on um, those assumed project costs going into outer years?
So again, we're likely to see other cost increases, but
Of
as a
course.
rough projection,
Yeah.
assuming level funding between federal fiscal year 2031 and 32, so
Right.
about $160 million of target available. The advanced construction schedule for Rutherford recommends about 45 million for that project. Then based on the cost increase for the Western Avenue project in Lynn, that's about another $20.3 million. Then there's the MPO program set-asides that are done for such as transit funding design projects.
Right.
That amounts to about another $15 million or so. So altogether, about half or a little under half of that $160 million would, or a little over half, would already be spoken for. But there would still be about 70, I think, to 80 million of bandwidth. That is not something that we were able to enjoy last year because I think we did an AC schedule in the 25-29 tip for a lot of projects.
And again, that all with all those caveats, assuming that costs don't go up, assuming we don't push projects out further and all of those things. But that's good. That's good to know that there's roughly about $70 million that is sort of not committed to in fiscal year 32.
Roughly. And again, we'll know more about that next year.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Those are useful kind of clarifying questions about sort of the situation that we're in. Brad, did you also have a similar kind of overarching?
Yeah, again, Chair, thanks. Just wanted to plus one Eric's questions and Ethan's responses, and remind all of us this is why we began this journey on readiness, on cost control policies that this MPO has adopted, was to get ready for some of these tricky moments. And it's actually really encouraging to me that we're able to get our heads up and look towards 32 and have some degree of certainty about some of those cost driver mega projects. However, I do want to note, in addition to everything Eric and Ethan just talked about, if we do not adhere to readiness and cost control policies, then that $70 million surplus in 32 goes away very, very quickly.
Brad, yeah, I think that's a good framing that yeah, part of the reason we're able to answer these questions is by having some kind of clarity on where projects have their best fit. So yeah, thank you. Eric, yeah.
Sorry. And then one last question. And then Ethan, I know you talked about a number of projects that, are ready that could be moved up. Are there any projects in that we're currently thinking in 2030, 31, 29 that potentially could move up sooner? I know you guys are constantly getting, updated information from MassDOT. Are there any that are potential that could move up?
Yeah, so I'll
Because
go in
because
order.
obviously 28 has 89 million. That's my point. That's the point is like,
Right. And fortunately, it's not 27 because that one is definitely a little more pressing. But I will note, I'll go in order here, basically, starting in 29. The one in 29 that stands out is fairly small. That is that uh, Sudbury Bruce Freeman project. But I again will reiterate that the Readiness Days recommendation and also MPO staff's recommendation for that is to hold 29.
Yeah.
At about $6 million, it wouldn't move too much. One of the other factors to consider as well with 29 and 28 is that while it doesn't start in 29, it's proposed for 28. The McGrath Highway project is one of those advanced construction projects where additional funding could be pulled up out of 29 into 28 to support that project. That being said, the more money that gets put in 28, the sort of more gravity that project has as far as how it influences the program. That's why we use advanced construction for larger projects. So those are the first two that I would
Wait,
tag.
can I ask on that point? What do you mean by that? Like the advanced construction schedule needs to show more in the early years. Is that your point?
Actually, so the advanced construction schedule is meant to align with the anticipated like encumbrance of costs by the contractors during construction.
Yeah.
The more money that gets shifted earlier, while that is usually fine, the sort of gravity that I'm referring to more says like sort of the consequences of what happens if something were to happen to the project. So, for example, in the Route 3A case with Hingham, about two-thirds of the project's funding was kept in 2026, one-third was kept in 27. When the project was pushed back, about 23 million went with it.
I see.
So
I
again,
see what
sort
you
of the
mean.
bigger the project is in a given year, the more impact it has if it moves.
Correct. Got it.
And that also includes moving up as well. So those are the two sort of 29 cases that I can think of for 2030 as far as shifting there. And I know there was some additional discussion folks wanted to have on this. Uh, there are three potential projects to consider. The first one, which we do have the memo for in hand, is the Cambridge Street Bridge Preservation Project with the City of Boston. That MassDOT's recommendation for that at Readiness Days was fiscal 28. Because that is bridge preservation type project, it is much more simple than the average tip development timeline for a project like that. The other two projects that could be worth considering, though they would likely go to 29, which is more cash constrained, would likely be Beecham Street in Everett and Washington Street in Brookline. But again, for those two projects, I would recommend they do so with an advanced construction schedule and that they don't go any earlier than 29, which doesn't necessarily address sort of the deficit issue in 2030 in the way that other projects may in that year. So I'm happy to restate any of those that I just said because I know I just rattled off a couple, but
But the point is, there's not a slam dunk in terms of moving something into 2028 where we have the most unprogrammed dollars.
uh, I won't go so far as to use the term slam dunk, but with the cost increase on the Cambridge Street Bridge project, which is currently being factored into that deficit in 2030, if that project were to move up into 2028, 2030 would have about $6 million left in it. So it would have a little bit of buffer, and there would still be plenty of money left in 28 if the Cambridge Street Bridge project were recommended for a move. So that one would fix it. With
Okay.
the other two projects I mentioned, those would be more like 29, and there's not enough money in 29 for them to sort of really fix it on their own.
Okay.
But, with, I believe, Washington Street, for example, that one is of a size beyond 25 million, so it could still be AC'd as well.
Okay. So you're probably getting, information updates daily on the status of that. So maybe we'll know more next week.
And I will say that that was the schedule of the Cambridge Street Bridge was on the list of kind of projects to talk about today.
Sorry.
I do want to say that we're getting kind of tight on time. I've been told 2 o'clock, very latest 2:10. So I'm gonna actually go to the first item that came in about which is like a talk co about information about cost increases and the methodology for calculating them, which applies to multiple of the projects that have kind of seen these cost increases, especially following a 25% design submittal. I think Erin was interested in sharing some kind of information about that she's gathered.
Thank you. I appreciate it. To anyone who's joined since we started, I'm Erin Chute. I'm with the town of Brookline. And at our last subcommittee meeting, we talked a bit about cost increases. And one of my colleagues, Len from Arlington, had said it really would be helpful to have an example of kind of what what we're talking about in terms when a cost increase happens and kind of the communication or where those changes are made. So I took the Washington Street project. I have a little example for you that I'm going to walk through that I think is helpful and probably applies to some of the other projects. And I think should be considered when we're thinking about our initial estimates in the tip and what we should be planning for these projects based upon kind of where they are. So would it be okay if I shared my screen? All right, let's see.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. So Washington Street has been in the in and on the tip, has a very high score for quite some time. And we recently saw a big increase. And I think, as I said at our last meeting, this is a surprise to us and was a surprise to staff. So we did a deep dive. We actually took the CAPE, the Contract Advertising and Planning Estimator, and our consultants pulled that apart to look at our base cost estimate and where those cost increases can be seen, just so we could be really clear on where those happen. So if you look at the box on the left, that is the Washington Street estimate for the project. And I don't know if it's a little hard to read. I can make it a little bigger. But the subtotal for construction items is this 23.4 million. And if we go over to the Mass DOT cost estimate, and where they're seeing that project, it's the same $23.4 million. So we're starting with that same base, and that hasn't changed. They're actually, for whatever reason, $20,000 less, but that is not a typo. That's true in terms of our estimate and then what's on their CAPE. Now, from there, they ask for the raw numbers to be put into their data set, right? And then for our own budgeting purposes and what we've shared in the past, we have a 10% construction contingency. That's around 2.3. On the Mass DOT side, they also have a 10% construction contingency. Again, very similar numbers. We have a construction administration, it's 1.17. They have their construction engineering, 1.2. Again, really very much in line, our numbers. The traffic police, so our police details, we have that, we're at 1.87. They're at about 1.5. So again, our numbers are really kind of in alignment moving forward. And then for utility force accounts, utility estimate, we have 1.1 in our estimate, and they're at around $900,000 for that. So our numbers, and that's the number that we've been sharing with the MPO and cost estimates, kind of those are the numbers that we've been sharing, and they're very much in alignment with Mass DOT. Our 25% has been submitted, and just to be clear, when municipalities submit their numbers, they are explicitly told not to include a design contingency, and that's in that 3.2 item below. So with our numbers, and now at 25%, being submitted, having comments, etc., Mass DOT's formula applies now 25% design contingency. So that number is then added, and you can see it's here. That's nearly $6 million on this project. And then MPO staff is taking that, and rightfully so, but this isn't in the numbers that we put into the portal, adding linear inflation on that project to the year in which it is programmed. So here you're going to see what ends up being about a 16% increase on top of the 25%. So what you're seeing here is the difference between the consultant estimate and the MPO projected cost now of 3.9 million is primarily due to how the contingencies and inflation are applied and when, not a difference in the underlying construction work. So anyway, I'll take that down, and I can also share this as a document with the group. But I think that's important in terms of just some of the conversations that really make it sound like the project has changed in scope, or some of the estimates were perhaps incorrect. I think that the way that TIP projects generally move forward is very formulaic, and different contingencies are added at different points of time. And so as we move forward and thinking about our readiness guidelines and also cost estimates, I think we're going to need to factor at what phase is this project in terms of having escalations put on it by Mass DOT, because our our staff is going to use and has to use those numbers that are provided by Mass DOT, and they should be. But I thought that it really might be helpful to see that. And I'll give another example that I was talking about with staff. Is there was a pedestrian bridge project that they had thought was an $8.9 million project. This was a project that Brookline has been working on for a bit. And our cost estimate is 14.2. And that the 8.9 is just that raw data that Mass DOT wants. So if the staff was just thinking, is this project ready to be programmed? Where are we with this? They would be using an $8.9 million estimate and trying to figure out where to put that in the tip. Whereas we already know with our estimate, it's 14.2. And that does not include what would ultimately be Mass DOT 25% design contingencies. So I think there's just a question and it's a conversation to be had around the budget numbers that we see and when and why they might shift at different points in the process.
Thank you, Erin. Yeah, and I think that's certainly, I think, yeah, be interested in seeing the, yeah, having that printout, and I think what you speak to, one points I think I'm glad we have now in the readiness guidelines the requirement to have updated cost estimates, but also I think what we're seeing is, or what your information is pointing to, is that the requirements for being included in that outer year of the tip are still just the pre 25%, and so don't have those all the additional contingencies added to them. So something for further conversation. Thank you. So the next project that came in for conversation was the Cambridge Street Bridge project. We do have folks, Joe Fleury, the project manager, able to speak to that, as well as James Turnbull from Gill Engineering. And there was a memo prepared as well for members. So I guess I'll open it up to kind of questions about the project. And I think Ethan spoke a little bit to the consideration around whether it could whether its schedule and assessment by MassDOT would maybe make it appropriate to move to a federal fiscal year 28. Brad.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate the technical memo and appreciate all the discussion we've been having here. One thing that came up earlier in this meeting that I just wanted to put an exclamation point on and perhaps ask our partners at Mass DOT to chime in on. It's been said a couple of times in TIP committee meetings and in full board meetings that Mass DOT staff have identified low risk and high readiness factors for the Cambridge Street Bridge. I just think it's really important to get that on the record here in this meeting. So if that could be part of our discussion, I'd appreciate it from the MassDOT side.
Brad. All right. Yeah, do we have any other kind of questions? Yeah.
Sorry, Jen. It's Michael Dowd. Brad, you are correct. Mass DOT feels that 2028 is an achievable timeframe for Cambridge Street.
Thank you. Would it be helpful if Joe described any of the reasons for that? I know we did come to an earlier meeting, but if not, we can move on to the next. Yep, Eric.
So just to confirm it does, MassDOT, you guys think we could move the bridge into 2028? And so what does that then do, Ethan, to 2030?
I will let MassDOT speak to their disposition, and then I will answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're good. Okay. So Ethan, thanks very much. Eric, yeah, we do feel confident based upon where we currently are with the design readiness and the submissions that are anticipated later this summer. We spoke with the city. They are certainly able to get us to a point where a PS&E is ready and all of the necessary rights of way is secure. So that's why we feel pretty confident with the FY28 advertising.
And then I can also follow up to basically say at the project's new cost estimate, we're probably looking at around about anywhere from $3 to $5 million left in 2030, as in positive balance, should that project move out of 2030 into 2028. So 2028 would go down by about 20 million, but still leaves about 69 million available in 28, takes us out of the red in 2030.
And what is then would be remaining in 2030? You said how much?
I have a number somewhere. I want to say it's around anywhere from $3 to $5 million off the top of my head.
Yeah, and
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Brett?
Thanks, Jerry. Again, team, I just want to acknowledge that this is part of the reason that we set up this readiness framework and part of the reason we set up the TIP committee. And I would ask that members try to convey this specific information at future board meetings. We are in some cash flow challenges. We've been diagnosing them for quite some time. Readiness guidelines were established to help us get out of these paper bags occasionally. And if we have consensus and convergence from state agency experts, from local jurisdiction roadway owner, and a recommendation towards 28 programming helps us manage cash flow in these constrained environments. I think that's really important for us to surface and achieve consensus on at full board as soon as next week, if staff are looking for that from us at the full board next week. Thank you.
Brad, any other questions? All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to the next project, which is the Boylston Street bridge project. The project manager for that, Charlotte Fleetwood, actually broke her arm and is at a doctor's appointment at the moment. Well, should be available at the MPO meeting next Thursday. That being said, I can speak to a little bit to the project and answer any questions about its current status, if that's of interest. So I'll I'll see if there's any questions from members specifically about the project. Brad.
Jen, thanks for indulging. I realize you're not the project manager, but I think it's important. This committee has been discussing a whole variety of readiness criteria. One thing that we've heard from proponents is progress on public engagement milestones. And I want to just lift up the work that the City of Boston has been doing on Rutherford Avenue to try to acknowledge and respect critical feedback from MPO members about a lack of focus and lack of milestones on that project. And to y'all's credit, you've done some of those things. I've attended some of them. Where is Boylston at in terms of public engagement and letting folks know that things may have changed from 2020 or 2021, some of those last milestones that are in our TIP guidance? Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah. So we had as you mentioned, there was a 2021 submittal for an initial 25% design package that included the segment of Brookline Ave in the Sears Rotary, which is owned by DCR and was the site of a cyclist fatality. DCR had initially supported that, ultimately decided to address that area as part of a Park Drive feasibility study that they are leading, and we're working very closely with them now. So we subsequently did rescope the project with MassDOT. We've been working towards a revised 25% design package. We are now at a point where have been begun conversations with some of the major stakeholders and plan to host a public meeting in late April. We wanted to kind of in responding to some of that feedback, make sure we're getting out before the community and sharing what's planned and making sure we're all set before kind of hitting that submit. So that's our plan right now, and I'm hoping we'll be able to share the dates for that at our next board meeting. It is the project is still a priority of the cities. It's on our 2015 to 17 high crash network for pedestrians. There's just a very high volume of people and activity in that area going to the different venues, including Fenway and MGM, and a lot of folks that we've seen crossing, especially and at mid-block. As you know, it's a 4-lane cross section now, so a high threat. Many opportunities for the double threat crashes there. So that's sort of the primary impetus of this project is to make things safer. There also has been a lot of that area redeveloped. So there's been some interim improvements protected bike lanes that are sort of more of a quick build variety, and this project would come back and make those permanent. Happy to take any additional questions, Len.
Just to make sure, I'm looking at the right project. This is 606-453, the one that's in red and recommended for potential removal from the tip.
606-453, that is the project. It's in red, but not recommended for removal. It's recommended for
delay.
2031.
Oh yeah, 2021. No, there you're right. Yeah, got you. Okay, fine,
Yeah.
fine. I got you. Yeah, I think this might be, maybe the project or a type of project which David Muller was saying. Well, look, we have projects that are ready to go, and they're waiting to get on the tip. We don't have room in 2031 because we're pushing things, back, and now they're kind of taking space. And that kind of gets at my question, a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was a month ago, when I said, "Look, we put a project on the tip. We don't give it really like a time to live." And so we put this one on the tip in like 2019 or whatever. It's been there for 5 years. And now we're pushing it back. For another number of years, and so it's going to have been on the tip. For like 10 years. I think we as a group have to decide, like when we put a project on a tip, how long can it stay there? Because if it gets on, and then for whatever reasons we keep moving it around like a year or two or whatever, then it could be on the tip for a long time. They may have very good reasons for why that's the case, but I think we have to kind of come up with a standard for those reasons are, so that we're not simply like saying, okay, well, we like these folks, and we're going to leave the project on the tip, where we have all these other projects that are doing their work, and they're kind of ready to go. So I think we need to work that out. We probably will not be able to work that out for this cycle, but I think it's really something we need to come to terms with, because I think if David says, at the meeting, like there's another project here that should go into 2031, and they've done their work. I'm going to have a hard time not agreeing with that, and I think we're going to have to make a really good case, for why we push this back, to 2031, because the history seemingly isn't good. Maybe we can get an explanation for why, it's been a delay of 5 years, and why that's not going to happen again. And I'm sorry, I'm a little animated. I'm not upset. Sometimes when I get excited, my voice gets a little loud, and I come across as aggressive. And please forgive me for that. And so I don't mean to be like seem angry or anything, so that's where I'm coming from on that, and that's why I'm kind of bringing up the whole thing, with David from last week and my concern about things just staying on the tip for a long, long time. That's it. Thank you.
Understand, Len. Yeah, I understand that, but not personal, and we can certainly come prepared next week with information on the reasons why this project has been a longer one, and totally acknowledge that. Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I would I would echo some of those points. I do think it's important for the city, and I know that you all as project managers, there's you often you run into a point where you're looking for guidance from leadership and that might not be there, and that's what causes delay. I think it's important for those leaders to hear that, like, we if like not making those decisions, it isn't just deferring things in the city. It's has this impact on the whole tip, and sometimes I don't know if that's fully understood. And we can see it here right now. Like, pushing this out into 31 means we have less funding for other projects. We're talking about taking a project off. So yeah, I think it's important, just for that message to get delivered. Um, Question for you though, Jen. I know one of the issues has been whether to move the curbs or not, and if and that has a big, cost and complexity implication. If the city decides to kind of keep the curbs where they are, do you think the design could be done faster and it could be potentially moved up to 28? Maybe that's not a question for you because you're not the project manager, but I don't know, maybe that's something we could, um, not for today and not for this tip cycle, obviously, because we've done tip readiness day and we have to go with what is out there. But I just wonder if that's something in the future, just thinking about projects that might be able to be moved up. Um, is this a candidate in the future if the design ends up being a little more straightforward?
Yeah. Certainly appreciate the question. Um, I our own kind of schedule shows like that this is a very smaller project, like in terms of length project, and not as much complexity as some other projects. That said, we don't. Um, it's not of a category that's totally separate from other projects that were analyzed from the readiness guidelines. So we didn't want to you know try be it's very different from Cambridge Street, where that is quite a separate type of project. So certainly we're wanting to move very fast, and if we can kind of demonstrate that progress by next year, we would love to. But we wouldn't want to kind of uh, not kind of, as Brad was speaking to, we need to ensure that there's alignment between
Absolutely.
the readiness guidelines and MassDOT's guidelines and the municipal uh, understanding of a project's readiness. And so we wouldn't be asking for any sort of exception if that weren't all aligned.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate the update.
Yeah. All right. And I do realize we're uh, um, beyond the time that was given to me. I'm sorry, staff. Um, so I think we should move on to the following agenda item, and then if there's time following that, we can return to the other two projects or other one project, Swampscott, that had come in.
Yeah,
So
I
over
can.
to Adriana.
Thank you. I can try to be quick. I'm just going to give a preview of tip amendment 3, which is going to go out for public comment if the board votes to do so next MPO meeting. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we have a couple of things in this amendment. There's a combination of cost increases, delays, and new projects. We have several new projects to consider in the transit transformation program. Um, and then a few of these, a small subset, we're able to execute in 2026. So we're going to present all of those. And for our current projects, so the cost increases are all for projects that need to build on their words to ensure that they advertise on time. So if you go to the next slide, please. So here are the new projects. If you would like more information about them, again, we have the project descriptions, which were in the last MPO meeting materials. We have the CADA Access for All and K-band dialysis transportation projects. These were both agreed to be funded partially in 2027 during the last MPO board meeting, and this is their 2026 portion. We have an MWRTA project, the procurement of compressed natural gas vehicles for $3.4 million. And then we have two MBTA projects. These were the two projects that were given to us by the MBTA that could be funded in 2026. We have Symphony Station, which is almost entirely funded in 2026. They will also request 6.5 million in 2027 because just to meet fiscal constraint. And the Downtown Crossing Vertical Transportation Improvements Phase 2 project for $15 million. These are both accessibility focused projects, so focusing on elevators and other and other accessibility improvements. Lastly, we have MAPC's Joint Municipality Blue Bikes Expansion Project. This includes 1,500 e-bikes, 17 new stations across several different municipalities. So Ethan's comment. Yes, this is correct. And this would be for about $6 million and would be part of MAPC's effort to electrify the Blue Bike system. Next slide, please. We have a couple changes to the current program of projects, including the two cost increases for the Peabody multi-use path construction project and the Linfield rail trail construction. These are both in their final design stages, and these cost estimates were made as part of the final design submissions. Next slide, please. We also have a couple changes to the design programs. We have two projects in Holliston and Sherburne that both received funding through the FFY 2025 project design pilot. And they are both requesting additional money in FFY 2026, so on top of the funding received in 2025, in order to meet the higher than expected bids. So this would be $350,000 for Holliston and $887,000 for Sherburne. We have a third trail project for design, which is the Marblehead Border to Boston Trail design. That did not receive an FFY 2025 design award in the regional target program. It was funded instead with an earmark, but it is also requesting additional funding in FFY 2026 for $125,000. Next slide, please. Then we have four projects that are being recommended for delay out of FFY 2026 due to their readiness statuses and their project schedules. We have the Belmont Community Path, Phase 1, the Boston improvements on Boylston Street, the Woburn intersection reconstruction at Route 3, and the Hingham improvements on Route 3A. Three of these projects, the Belmont, Woburn, and Hingham projects, will be recommended for programming in FFY 2027, and the Boston project will be recommended for programming in FFY 2031. Next slide, please. So that concludes the preview of Amendment 3, and if you have any questions about either the new projects or the currently programmed projects and their corresponding changes, please let me know, and also we can discuss the proposed program. Thank you.
Adriana, Brad.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Adriana. Quick question for staff. My notes and my memory of some of our recent TIP committee and full board meetings suggests to me that we have discussed some of the transit transformation projects extensively over the last couple of months. And I just think it's important to kind of confirm that, although we seem to be framing this as kind of some new projects. They are not new to our board. They're not new to our members. So Adriana or Ethan, can you just confirm CADA, K-band, MWRTA, MBTA Symphony, MBTA Downtown Crossing, MAPC Blue Bikes? Those are all transit transformation projects that have been discussed a few different times and ranked as, ready to go. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so these were submitted during our normal TIP application process, with the exception of the CADA projects which were submitted as part of the community transit grant application. So these all submitted TIP applications either in December or January and have been scored and reviewed by staff. And Ethan, if you want to add anything onto that, but thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add in is one key distinction for this versus last year is that in this case, we were able to actively solicit projects for fiscal 26 inclusion from our, partners over at the MBTA, I'm sorry, MBTA, MassDOT, CADA, and MWRTA, because we had much better, I think, advance warning about the 26 surplus than we had this time last year about the 25 surplus as well. So these were projects that were directly targeting this year, not ones that we were trying to like pull up without a score per se.
Thank you. Any other questions about this set of projects? Again, these are going to come before the MPO board this coming week. So it'd be, yeah, helpful to understand if there's any comments, questions on them, or if generally they're, as Brad has mentioned, they've been seen a few times. Any kind of sentiments? Yeah, Len.
I'm keeping quiet so you can like go on to the next thing, and maybe we can come back, for some general comments because I certainly have something to say about other stuff. So I just figured I'd say something because you were waiting for someone to say something. So
Good, Len.
you sure?
Yeah, just after this, we just have members items. So this could be
Oh, I didn't
a
realize
shorter
that.
conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I was. Well, uh, well, I did want to say something in reference to I'm sorry, Aaron had said. I wanted to express appreciation and then say something about our general approach, meaning to the tip. So maybe that should be members items, or maybe after Brad, I can come back and expand on that. That's it. Thank you.
Sure, Len. I'll do Brad and then back to Len unless there's other kind of specific questions about this.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Len. So one quick point and one quick question. So the quick point is for anybody who hasn't needed to follow the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan work that our MPO has completed and that our MPO endorsed last week. I want to spotlight the great work happening in town of Holliston, town of Sherburne, which had been specifically identified as priority candidates for the next phase of grant writing and quick build safety improvements coming out of that Vision Zero Action Plan. So I just love to see the harmony that we are starting to bring to tip funded projects and special policy and planning work, all through the lens of what Dennis Giambetti identified last week as a critical priority, which is sub-regional equity. So shout out to the good folks in Holliston and Sherburne who are driving our Vision Zero agenda forward. Thank you. The quick question, though, Jen, I think is about cost increases. So staff described a couple of rail trail or rail with trail or greenway projects in the 26 amendment proposal. One was Peabody and one was Linfield. We had extensive discussion earlier today about scope, about risk, about readiness. So I just wanted to get a thumbs up from staff. Again, we are talking about amendments to the 26 plans. So those are in final design, you said, Adriana. And so all various and relevant agencies have identified them as low risk and ready to advertise. Can you
Yeah.
confirm, please? Thank you.
Yes, so through during the tip readiness days, MassDOT confirmed 2026 as the predicted readiness year for both of these projects. And again, they're both in their final design, so they're approved 100% submissions. They're in their very final stages of design.
Yeah. Great. Any other comments, questions on this project specific? I'll go to Len.
Okay. Well, thank you. So yes, I mean, I did want to express appreciation for Aaron's explanation about the cost increase, and these weren't associated with scope at all. It seems like it's just a systemic issue with the way that we determine the cost of a project at a given phase. This is known. And so I think when we get ready to put a project on the fifth year of the tip, either we as the MPO, or the board, add in a contingency cost, or we keep a buffer. we don't want to keep a buffer. I mean, I've argued for that, many years, and it's been clear that we don't want to keep the buffer. And so I think we just have to we add that contingency cost in ourselves because we know it's coming. I think I mean, this is going to be a harsh word, but I think it's just irresponsible of us not to do that because we just create problems for ourselves later on if we don't do that. So once again, that can maybe something that comes out as the tipper being as advice being this year or something that we really think about being for the next cycle. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Aaron.
I just want to thank you, Len, and I brought it up just as an opportunity for us to discuss it and kind of really dig in. I don't think it really was or is irresponsible on anyone's part. I think these are really complex projects that take a lot of time and are at different phases. I also think that our readiness guidelines that are programming projects later now, kind of once they've either been at 25%, is going to make a big difference in terms of having those numbers and estimates baked in. So I think it's important for us to deal with projects that have been programmed a little bit earlier and whether those estimates have been programmed in. I think it's a question that we can ask going forward. So staff is doing a great job. MassDOT's doing their piece. The municipalities are submitting everything. It's just there's so many players. It's just something for us to be mindful of.
Yeah, Len.
I understand that, Aaron, and I guess I'm saying it's not irresponsible any of the players. I think it's responsible for us as a board, who is trying to make sure that we are um, allocating the funds effectively. And so if we know that there is going to be a design cost associated with these projects, on the scale that you demonstrated. We can estimate that. We can get like in a ballpark, and like I said, we should build that in to our own contingency, for that fifth year out, so that as projects move along the tip, we don't get to like year three, go, oh, it costs a whole lot more. Well, we knew that was going to happen. We may not know how much it was going to happen. We had a good sense of how that was going to happen. And if we build that in to year five, we don't have to then scramble in year three, because hopefully as we do follow our readiness guidelines, we will have fewer surprises. But one of those surprises should not be, that we didn't factor in the 25% design contingency that we know MS that's going to include. So that's why I use the word irresponsible. It's on us as a board. And like I said, it's a strong word. I'll pull back from it, but I think you get the sense of how I feel about it. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. And yeah, I did want to also, just to this point, note that the readiness guidelines do now have requirements for cost estimate frequency. Like once a project is on the tip, I think it's every 1.5 years. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong. So the project now should not, because they're to be continue advancing into the year, since we're sticking with the readiness guidelines, they need to have hit new milestones and have cost estimates associated with them. But I think it's probably just, as you were kind of pointing to, that first year where we do have projects that haven't hit their full 25% submission, and might have just a pre 25%, which doesn't have the MassDOT cost estimate associated with it. So I think we've kind of narrowed down our problem to. So I think we're making some progress there. All right, I realize we are now at time. So I guess, yeah, I guess members' items, which I guess this was sort of bled into. Any other members have items to bring? All right. Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Aaron.
Moved.
All right. As a second?
Taking seconds.
Thank you. All right. All in favor? Well, adjourn.
Yes.
Thank you.